Alright, so this is essentially the full Roy G. Biv spectrum that you've been taught since elementary school, with the addition of black and white. Start right off the bat, let's just talk about the interrelation of all these. So right in center, you have will, which is green. I want to ask these guys, what kind of an emotion is will? What is willpower?
I think the most important thing to understand about all these emotions, and especially will, is that I think will is a catalyst for all the other emotions here. In the comic books especially, you know, the Green Lantern, specifically Hal Jordan, was very famous for not having any fear. And so, you know, he became the poster child for the Green Lanterns as far as, you know, will goes. Blackest Night was very important to introduce all these different emotions and to actually give them, you know, a physical attribute. So I think will is really just a catalyst, and not necessarily an emotion, but something that triggers an emotion.
All right, so that's part of what I wanted to say here, but before we move on, I want to let everyone know here that this panel is really about you guys. We love arguing this stuff, but we've argued it like 12 times already. So by all means, interrupt us, put your hand up, throw a hat at us, anything if you want to get our attention and interrupt us. Please do, because you may know more than we do. All right, as he was saying, you'll have to interrupt me quickly. I speak fast. Green is right in the center. Green is will. As he said, he thinks it's a catalyst for all the other emotions. I personally don't feel that will is necessarily an emotion, but as you can see on this spectrum timeline, it's kind of the center of all emotions. It's directly in the middle of what you might consider the positive emotions and the negative emotions. Ignoring, for the moment, life and death, considering they're either all colors or the absence of color. But, talking the interrelation between, does anyone else see any correlations between any of the emotions, like how they're placed next to each other?
Well, as we talked before on this, the emotions seem to go in gradients. For example, you have a will, and hope being right next to will is the, whenever hope is next to the willpower in the comic books, it supercharges the Green Lanterns. And in real life, it's much the same way. If you're depressed about something, you're not going to really accomplish a lot. When you're hopeful, you're more active, you're more energized. Whereas fear cripples your willpower to go out and do anything. You're afraid of losing a job, you're afraid of losing your girlfriend, so you don't do things. It cripples your willpower. Whereas anger is right next to fear. It's often been said that
Avarice is actually in between rage and fear.
Is it?
Yeah, orange.
Avarice?
Yeah.
Oh, so I'm looking at different sheets here. Avarice is the same thing though. You fear losing what you have, or you fear not being able to get what you want. Avarice in between. If you want something, you lose it. Fear of losing what you want, fear of losing what you have, that can lead to anger.
Alright. Does anyone else have any other comments? Does anyone notice any relation between anything that might be next to each other?
The ones on the opposite sides of their colored spectrum are opposed to each other. Hope is diametrically opposed to fear, avarice to compassion, love to rage, death to life.
Very nice. Very nice. Go ahead.
Could it be argued that green, rather than the catalyst for all emotions, is lack of any emotion?
Yes, I definitely think so. I was going to point that out. It's important that will is like no emotion because, again, Green Lanterns are like, technically they're like the beat cops of the universe.
I feel as though they represent almost complete neutrality.
Yeah, you know, I completely agree. I do.
And go ahead.
Why do you think that it's in a line as opposed to circle? Because you made the comment that one side was negative and one side is positive. That's not exactly true.
Exactly, and once we start discussing some actual psychologists, that is a point to bring up. So please show that, but it's a very good point that we will definitely be bringing up. That's one of the things I noticed, because I'm about to pick this apart later. Actually, we all are. But I just want to point out a couple correlations in here just to start it. As you guys said, they're almost exact opposites. And speaking just in the comics, that's probably why the Guardians, who are creatures that abandoned emotions millennium ago, they chose something that was the least emotional of any emotions on the emotional spectrum. So they abandoned all emotions, so it would make sense that they would choose will, which we are saying is not necessarily an emotion. But just as an aside, you can answer if you want, in the Green Lantern universe, death, the absence of all color, is also essentially the absence of all emotion. If will is the absence of all emotions, what's the difference between will and death?
Actually, black contains every color ever will.
Isn't that white?
No, white is the absence of color.
No, that's you're talking color versus light. That's different.
White is the mix of all different colors when you look at it from a white spectrum. Because it is a spectrum. The spectrum is a rainbow. Refracted light splits off into each of these individual colors.
You're thinking additive, like if you're going to mix paint or something like that, you're slowly going to get browner and browner and darker until it becomes black. And we're talking on light here, and I don't want to get into quantum physics here, but we will discuss just a little bit of light as energy. It's a very smart conversation. We should all pat ourselves on the head. Alright, one other thing I wanted to point out here, if this is, as some of us have said, is the center point, as the further you go this way, and the further you go this way, if we're saying this is the negative, and this is the positive, the more extreme each emotion gets. Go ahead.
Just as a thought, will might not be the absence of emotion, but maybe a balance of emotion. That's not to say that each Green Lantern doesn't have every single emotion. They just use them in the proper context. They understand when emotion should come into play versus when your emotion should come into play.
Whether having complete or a complete lack, it doesn't matter if it's balanced or balanced by extreme.
The Jedi versus Sith, basically.
So it's the center point between good and evil?
Well, with that idea of being of willpower not being an emotion, I absolutely agree. And if you follow the comic book philosophy of it, you got originally black, you got darkness, then which is nothing, then white, which is light, and that starts the emotional cycle. Green, of course, the Guardians of Power chose that for a reason, because it was removed from emotion, the strongest power removed from emotion. Green is also the center pivotal role in between white and black, which are not emotions. And I believe that the green light is of willpower is actually a mechanism or a force, much like light or death, that simply allows for emotions to occur. And cause and effect, emotions being the effect, and will be the cause of those emotions.
Yeah, I like to say that. Okay, so the willpower, especially in the comics, Blackest Night was important because it reiterated that humans, specifically Hal Jordan, Kyle Rayner, Guy Gardner, all these John Stewart, all these Green Lantern that are humans, were not just necessarily, they had will, but they also had an attribute to each of them. Like, for example, Guy Gardner is a very headstrong guy. He's a lot of people say he has a lot of rage. Hal Jordan has no fear. John Stewart's the type of guy that, he's a soldier, so he's very, clean cut. And everybody has different emotions, and especially in the comics, they bring back the whole human thing and about life being actually in Earth and starting in Earth. So humans bring a different aspect to the willpower once Hal Jordan becomes one of the Green Lanterns. So I think that's
Just a point though, for a bunch of creatures that claim to abandon emotion, they sure pick some awfully emotional soldiers. But I mean, you just get to this point for the moment. As I said, as you get more towards each extreme, further away from will, you kind of get a little more extreme in the emotions. Yellow Lanterns have actually even worked with the Green Lanterns in several occasions. This supercharges them. So this hurts them, this supercharges them. The further you get away, like these Red Lanterns, which are almost mindless, blind rage creatures, puking out napalm blood, they're pretty extreme. And then you get to black lantern, which is death. Going this way, the indigo lanterns, which are all a bunch of reformed criminals who suddenly are forced to feel compassion, all the way to the probably one of the most complicated, not only the spectrum in the comics, but of the emotions ever, is love. Those Star Sapphires have been both enemies, they've been friends. It's kind of very hard to predict love and to predict a Star Sapphire. Any comments before I move on? You two look like you might have something to say.
I was like, what if Will is just a pushing force to push the different emotions out? Because, like you said, how each different lantern had their own, like, kind of, one was more rugged and maybe didn't have fear. Like, he had hope towards people that pushed more hope out of him. The other one, you know, might have a little more rage, you know, like, the Will just, it's not the center point, it's not the lack of emotion, it's every emotion, but it depends on the person that pushes whatever one happens.
Right. So
No, that's actually really interesting. And I think the comics do display a physical aspect of that. Like you said before, you know, the Blue Lanterns help energize the Green Lanterns, you know. And so every power has, like, you know, a physical aspect to them. You know, the Rage Lanterns, their heart, you know, it's pretty much like the ring takes over the heart, and so they don't have, they have to depend on that. So, you know, everything has like a physical aspect in all those places. So they're not necessarily like through the ring, but I think that they do have, you know, certain qualities that come out physically.
All right, he had something he wanted to say in the back. Why can't they be affected? Why can they? They abandon emotions, but it's not meaning someone else's emotion can't affect them.
That's because the green light of will, that's all it is. It's a neutral light. It's the human host that's affected by the other emotional lights in the spectrum. The human host uses his will to manifest these constructs. Other lights can manifest constructs, sure, but that's used from the will of the host of the ring. Whereas the Green Lantern constructs, every Green Lantern is the most proficient at forming constructs, because it is the energy of matter, of movement, of action. The other rings affect the Green Lanterns in the same way. And will, even the ring of willpower, can be negated and discarded depending on the emotional state. For example, take Hal Jordan, who was pretty much owned by every ring in the Blackest Night series. I mean, rings just said, I'm taking you over and using you as a suit. So the ring is a tool. Willpower, green light, is just a force to be used by sentient beings.
And partially to answer your question too, I like this analogy. Gandhi can reach emotional abandonment and a higher spiritual level. It's not to say somebody very angry can't set him on fire. Alright, so moving on. Now we're going to start to discuss and pick this apart on the mistakes that might be in here. Now, personally, I think the Green Lantern comics did this really well. They had to fit 30 years of comic lore and pre-established characters into a cohesive storyline. And for DC Comics, that's a challenge. You didn't even have to do a crisis to fix it. But I think there's a few things missing for here. For example, these are supposed to be representative of the base emotions, like the core where all other emotions are derivatives or combinations of. Is there anything missing that you might consider a core emotion from this? Anyone? Alright, go ahead and say that again. Yeah. Sadness is one I think is drastically missing. Plus, some of them seem a little arbitrary. For example, compassion. Kind of seems like it's a combination of a few others. Huh? See? I might say that, which is actually right between the two. Humans love the number 7, so when we were coming up with our little origin big spectrum, we picked 7 colors. Personally, as an artist, I subscribe more to the secondary and primary color wheel. I don't think indigo is a base color. I think it's a combination of 2 others. but they had to make it fit.
Even so, I think that compassion is not necessarily an arbitrary color, because compassion and love are two different things. To love something is quite different than to show or have compassion for it. You can hate someone and still show compassion for their life or their belongings. You can show compassion without any shred of love whatsoever.
I'm not so sure that if you are going to be compassionate, you might need some love for your fellow man. Maybe a lower form of love than romantic or spiritual love, but some minor amount of love for your fellow man. All right. Now, as we had said earlier, the line is a little too inflexible. I personally don't think it's really a line. I personally think it's more of a circle. Like this. Ignore my sloppy circle. Pretend it's perfect. What'd you say? Somebody said something. You guys are trolling my panel. Alright, ignore the sauciness of it. It looks much neater on my paper, I swear. Alright. So I've actually divided this into 6 for the 6 basic primary and secondary colors. We've got red, got orange, got yellow, got green, we have got blue, and we have got violet, or purple. Now, if you were to fit these emotions into this, you think they would fit? Like if we had rage, avarice, fear, will, hope, love, does it fit in a circle? No? Go ahead, tell me what's wrong.
It doesn't really allow for the black or the white, which is why I'm suggesting maybe instead of a circle, you consider it kind of a parabolic arc.
I was going to say that too. That essentially the circle, you don't really want to look at it as a circle, but as a three-dimensional cone maybe, slowly progressing towards the combination of all light. So, and pretend this is three-dimensional, but if you think my circle is bad, you should see my cone. I swear I'm an artist. Alright, now,
I think the only way it's portrayed as a line is because it's the mass majority of humankind. It's much easier for us to think in linear terms, just like time. We like to think of it from start to finish, and it's easier for us to process it that way.
alright, now, moving into a little more of assigning emotions to this, I personally feel that Green Man got some of this wrong. So I actually subscribe to a psychologist by the name of W. Gerard Perot. He's a Georgetown psychologist. He, like a bunch of other psychologists, have done a ton of research on emotions. Where it comes from, what are the base, are there certain chemical reactions in your brain that combine to make all these different emotions? He's come up with about 6 base emotions. They're similar, but some of them are different. So let me write them on there for you. All right, so we have anger, sadness, which we said already was lacking, fear, surprise, and some people probably argue about that one, and joy or happiness. This whole spectrum here is kind of depressing sometimes. There's absolutely no happiness there. And I don't know what a sad one would look like here. You're probably crying all the time. It's very blue. All right. Let's just start off the bat of, I assigned the colors to this based on what I thought might interact together. Like we have our primary colors, we have red, yellow, and blue. which are anger, fear, and joy. There were secondary colors, which actually lie halfway between each of these emotions. Love is halfway between anger and joy. Sadness is halfway between anger and fear. And surprise is halfway between fear and joy. See that? Now it's starting to make, makes kind of sense. The colors might seem a little arbitrary based on what we like to assign colors to.
Well, if green is surprised, it kind of makes sense that the Green Lantern is perpetually surprised by receiving his ring, so...
Ever read those comics? Man, they get surprised by a lot. Hey, Manhunters, wow, that's a surprise.
Hey, we all got killed. Surprise!
Guess what? Mogo! Oh, he's dead. Everyone cried. No one saw it's Mogo. Alright, that's enough that.
Go ahead, you were going to say something?
Well, my first problem with this is the placements. We're talking about